So, Matt, what's it like running a business here in San Francisco, and what could we be doing to help you as a small business owner from a city's perspective make it easier for you to do that?
I don't have a good answer because I don't think we've run into anything at the city level that was really a challenge. I mean, we face the same challenges all businesses face, figuring out our audience, our business model, everything. That's hard. But it actually seems to be a pretty good environment, at least from what I've seen so far, for innovation and innovative companies to live, which is probably partially why, there's so many. Just within a 4-block radius, we have probably like 30% of what would be called Web 2.0.
Yeah, so I think the real answer is you have to go to some city that doesn't work and ask that question. Okay. It obviously works pretty well here. Okay, yeah, why don't you take that? We'll share this. Oh, yeah, share that. Great.
So, Ed, I've got a question for you. As you have led your department, it's a rather large department, through this process of getting people used to letting go of data and the fact that the data may not be accurate all the time, and the fact that people may look at it on a negative standpoint as showing what isn't working. What's been the most effective way you've had to get people more comfortable with releasing data and opening it up?
I'm not sure that I've gotten people more comfortable with it. I think to me it comes back to the bottom line that this is public information. And I think for many years a lot of people in city agencies and in county and federal agencies have seen data as their own rather as the public's. And we have this very cumbersome process for providing data to people through public records requests. And to me that's just not the way to do it. So what I am kind of reminding my staff is this is not our data, it's the public's data. And if we have concerns about its accuracy or viability, we need to make sure that the data is good. But ultimately it's not ours. We're just stewards of the data on behalf of the public. And the other side of it is that, I see accountability as a good thing. Like I said, it can be a little bit scary to take your stuff, what you're doing, your performance, and putting it out to the public, but there's no better way to hold yourselves accountable and hold the organization accountable than by doing that.
Okay.
And also, if you look at one of the more interesting trends of the past 5 years in products like Twitter is they default to being open. The default setting is share with everybody. And why shouldn't that be the default setting for the government as well?
So we're open for any questions or comments from anybody else. Anybody have anything?
Yeah, that one works there, right there.
Okay. Hi, Mike Magursky with Stamen Design here in San Francisco. I'm curious if the pipe flows in both directions. In other words, if people find data that's problematic or incorrect or out of date or in other ways sort of busted, is there a way to basically push back into the city and have a mechanism to accept that stuff?
It's a really good question, and we don't have it yet. Certainly we've talked about it and are working on ways to do that, and it's a great comment. And my chief technology officer and my head of R&D, if you will, on this project have been thinking about that, and we will make it part of the non-beta release to be able to get that kind of flow back and forth.
I would agree that that's really critical. I support you to make that very high priority. Also suggest, there's some interesting work in certain areas like Open 311, where other people are working on at least aspects of that problem, things that people are likely to report. That doesn't have to do with the data quality issue. But again, I would think that you could learn quite a lot from projects like OpenStreetMap that are building public data sets using volunteers, because they can actually give you insight into, how do you actually validate that it's good data and so on.
There is actually an example with Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry, and Friends of the Urban Forestry, FUF, where they built an application where people who are interested in trees can actually go to a website and mark what that tree is. So it's a way to get people who are really passionate about trees to get that data into the city. So I think that's a great question. I think it's getting steps over there. So our first step is getting the data out there. Second step, I think, is things about how do you get the people's intelligence and energy into the city.
But we do have, I think, maybe you're being modest, I think in what you've built for Data SF, there actually is an inbound path to rate the data sets, to provide feedback about the data sets, to suggest new data sets, to suggest applications. So there is a feedback path, and if you're pulling data from our department and you find that it doesn't make sense or it looks like there are problems, that there is a feedback loop that Jay has built into Data SF that allows for that.
And we have that on recoverysf.org as well.
Right.
You guys, how did you, tell us how, when you heard about this recycling, how did this all happen for you guys? You said, hey, we've got a great idea, we go find it. And Lauren?
Yeah, I work in the Department of the Environment, and we're doing some work on our web-based tool, and we decided that in addition to making some improvements to the tool, we also wanted to open the data up as sort of a side benefit that we could just push the data further. We spend a lot of time verifying this data. Every 6 months we call all these sites to make sure that hours are correct, the materials they accept are still the same. So we recognized that with the help of other people, we could push the data further, and lo and behold, someone from the development community wanted to help us do that. So with the new XML feed that we had developed, these folks from Nextiv and Hakuwale developed the iPhone app. In addition, Earth 911 is a national recycling database, so they were able to pull our data as a totally separate side benefit of us just building in this open data philosophy into some work we were already doing. So for a minimal cost up front, we were able to get 2 other conduits of data being pushed out. So good timing, and definitely supportive DT to pat us in the back and keep pushing us in that way.
Just tell us, how you guys decided to get involved for what reason?
Honestly? I think my name's Alan Wells. I was the producer on the app. And for me, I had known about SF Environment for a couple of years and known about the EcoFinder tool. And when I started working with the iPhone platform, the two just came together. Like, what a great idea that you could take this and make it available anytime, anywhere, instead of just on the computer, because that didn't seem to be a convenient way to consume the data. So when we heard that these guys already had the XML feed, that made our job that much easier to make it happen. So it was just a desire to do something good and useful for the city. But one of the things that's happened since then is we've been contacted by people who are citizens in other cities and in other countries even about, hey, I love this app, how can we get it here? So a question that I have for you guys is, how does San Francisco lead the way in establishing standards or pushing the limits with this? Because there's no technical reason the EcoFinder app couldn't be for all of California, for example, or the entire U.S. So what can we do so that the developers, our efforts are not just for such a small geographic area, that we could expand those and have them be compatible?
I won't say elect a new governor, but but I did. So it's might as well start there. But no, you've been studying this. Tell us. I love your vending machine analogy. It's absolutely right. And then that citizen participation is shaking that machine, saying, "Darn it, why?
Why can't you give us what we want, as opposed to help us build it?" And we're starting to see that. But I think the role here for government, is to think through the strategic issues. So, for example, these guys have this local app, and you say, well, would it be better to open source, some code so everybody creates their own local app, or is it better to build a national database? Is it so that there's one app that just works everywhere, and you just tell it where you live, and it works the same way? Is it better? Again, there's a lot of thinking that needs to go. What's the right way to syndicate out data? And I think it's also really important. One of the lessons we have is it's not generally done in a standards committee. It's done by a bunch of independent developers who do cool things and make the future happen, and the people vote with their feet. Matt didn't get together with some other set of people and say, we're going to agree that, that WordPress is going to be the great blogging tool. He just put it out there, and people adopted it, and there's other tools, but so it's just like any other marketplace. But what I think cities and states and the nation needs to think about is, what can it learn from the companies that have succeeded with technology? They usually they know something about the marketplace that other people don't. And so, I think it's really important to look at the lessons. There's lessons like keep it simple, keep it open, because open actually allows a lot of experimentation. So these guys built a great EcoFinder app. Well, it may be that there's some folks in Boise, Idaho, will build an even better one, And you say, well, what kinds of conditions will let that natural evolution happen, rather than saying we just stopped it right here? I think allowing failure is really hard for government. It's possible to do something wrong and then to back off from it. Again, it's really important that you do. It's funny because in a lot of ways, this movement is associated with the Democrats and President Obama, but it's profoundly Republican in its storyline, because it is actually about government doing less so the market can do more. It's the government doing the right things rather than the wrong things. And the design of so many great systems, whether it's TCP/IP or the World Wide Web or the original IBM PC, it was actually doing something fairly simple that then got elaborated out through the market rather than got designed from the ground up. So I would urge against a bunch of cities getting together and trying to come out with the master plan. What you really want to do is embrace a few simple, important principles. Make the data open, make it available quickly. As you said earlier, it's the people's data. It's not ours. And then when something good happens, celebrate it. And I think that's probably the one piece of really practical advice I'd give. I think it's really true for the data.gov site as well. It's really important to have an app store. Because if you look at data.gov or datasf.org, it's really just an API collection. It's here's some services that developers can build on. But how do the citizens actually find the applications? And I think it's also a great way to tell a story about government. People don't realize whenever you use a GPS, you're actually building on government as a platform. I mean, the government put up those satellites that make that stuff work. So think about all the different ways that you guys are providing services, and then start celebrating what people are building with it.
And part of that, I do want to recognize Stamen. They've done some great works. I don't know if any one of you kind of want to speak about what you've done with some of city data. I think it's really innovative. Sean? Come on, Sean.
So a lot of this started actually in Oakland. Mike is a resident of Oakland and was a little bit frustrated with the crime situation over there. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, but what he did in his spare time was he started actually scraping these horrible maps that Oakland was publishing. It was the only way that they were publishing any crime data, was putting these goofy little icons on these bitmap images that were really hard to read, and the entire site required you to step through 9 different forms to get to an actual map of information. And so what he started doing in his spare time was scraping all of that data off, putting it in his own database, and then he built around this a map of Oakland crime, which is now called Oakland Crime Spotting. And what we've done with the data that Jay and his team have made available to us is now built San Francisco Crime Spotting. And just the fact that we were able to get up and running with that data in a matter of days, really, I think speaks really well to this process, and the fact that the government making the data available really just speeds up the process of people being able to gain access to it. So we as a company are really interested in that. We as individuals are really interested in that as residents of San Francisco, and I think it's a win-win situation for everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
And I think one thing to add to that, San Francisco is leading by example. We, and thanks Jay for setting up the call, have been in conversations with the Obama administration, the White House, and really talking about them. And there are two things about that. One is it's kind of sad because they were so excited about what we're doing because no one was talking to them from a local level. No one appeared to be doing anything, and I'm sure other jurisdictions are. But they really want to showcase San Francisco because we appear to be doing the right thing and really can showcase what we're doing. And Tim, my thanks to you for setting up the conference next month, because I think that really will go a long way of leading by example, which is, I think, at a basic level what San Francisco can and should be doing, like many other cities, on subjects like this, on opening up technology. So thank you for that.
Question I have is, what more do you need from this is a nice, small, modest start, but in an ideal world, an ideal setting, what would we be doing in a much more aggressive manner? I mean, Matt, if you were running this city and you didn't have a board of supervisors in particular, you were just able just to rush right forward, what would be things you would be doing to get us to that next level?
It's harder with data than with software. In software, there's a license called the GPL, which is the most popular license in software. And one of its things is that it says if you build something on top of this, you have to make whatever you build on top of it just as open as the original. And it'd be interesting to see how that could apply to data. I'd be curious of Tim's thoughts here, that even though this data is open, there's no sort of guarantee or there's nothing encouraging people to make that things they build on top of it also open. So, we have this application now for San Francisco. Can I take that code and build it for Oakland? Can I take your visualization of those crime maps and that scraping and put it someplace else? I mean, in some extent, you guys are kind of like the Jon Snow of the modern day. He's the guy who, I think it was the 1800s, sort of, there was like a cholera, how do you pronounce that? Cholera? I guess we don't worry about it anymore. Cholera outbreak in London, and people didn't know what the cause was. They didn't realize it was the water pumps, and eventually he made a map that showed this water sump and the deaths all around it. And you could it made it really, really obvious that it was radiating out from this. And there's equivalence in the crime data, there's equivalence in everything that we do today. So I don't think that you need necessarily a license restriction like the GPL is to make this work, but perhaps just positive reinforcement. So, for example, your equivalent of the App Store, the things you're promoting from the site. What if you can promote the things that are most open sort of at the top? Or maybe just that's all you promote. Let anyone do anything they want with the data, but just sort of give the positive reinforcements to the people who are doing it and opening their code and allowing other people to build on top of it. I think that would be pretty interesting.
I think there's really also some issues, though. A lot of these systems, that where the data grows through user contribution, they tend to have a natural tendency towards monopoly. So you need to make sure that, you say, because of course they get better the more people use them. So you want to make sure you don't make a deal with some provider who gets your data, gets that virtuous circle going, and then they get to stand up and say, oh, this is really my data. See that paragraph 8.231 in our contract? So I'd be very vigilant, to that point about making sure that public data stays public. I think another, thing I would really spend time on is, moving away from data, looking at the kinds of investments technology investments that address issues. For example, I know San Jose was talking about looking at low energy streetlights, and smart sensor-driven streetlights. These are kinds of initiatives that a city can take that can actually help spark a new industry that's information rich, that actually builds better infrastructure for the city at the same time as it's tackling a problem like global warming. So I would invite innovative thinking, not just in the IT, the pure IT functions, but also just thinking about, well, how do we manage our traffic lights? How do we manage our our street lights? And are there any interesting new technologies that we could apply there? What are our policies around solar? For that matter, in Colorado, they had to pass a law so that homeowners associations couldn't forbid clotheslines. It's silly little things like that, that can have a huge impact on important national problems.
Good news is we have piloted the Tenderloin on LEDs, sensor-driven LEDs. Once you can actually, that will prompt in an emergency by flashing aggressively exactly where the incident has occurred on a city block, where you can actually change the intensity with a PD, with any handheld device. We've got a new parking sensor strategy in San Francisco called SF Park. About a quarter of all the parking meters in the city are being converted to these new pay boxes, and the sensors are there, so you're actually able to determine at home whether or not there's parking on street or off street. We'll also be doing this in our parking garages before you even leave the home, because of those sensors and the technology.
And presumably when you're looking for a parking space, your little phone app or your in-car GPS may say there's one around the corner there.
And that's absolutely inevitable. And then something called integrated traffic management system. It actually exists right here, where you have signal preemptions and you have centralized traffic management and traffic flow. It's called SFGO, but it's really an integrated traffic management solution. Started at the Pac Bell Park was the first place. We actually, you'll see around the 7th inning, they'll change the lights dramatically, one from coming in to going out. and was the first sort of investment in this new system that we're rolling out throughout the city. But the only reason I bring those up because a lot of people don't know about those things. They're exciting, but they also, I think, piggyback on your point in terms of what cities can do.
You know, one thing that I think would be really relevant for those kinds of interesting technology initiatives, you don't want to say, you know, if some company is making an investment in a really interesting new technology, you know, they've got to be able to, you know, make their business model work. But that being said, there are many cases where you may be, let's say you're doing custom mods to a system like that. And then you say, well, Phoenix is going to have to make the same custom mods. Could you actually retain the rights to your mods that are kind of the city-specific things? I really had this in a conversation with Anish Chopra when he was still the Secretary of Technology for Virginia. He says, look, every one of us has to build a DMV, you know, and we're all doing the same thing. We're all paying the same Beltway bandits, you know, literally billions of dollars to rebuild effectively an identical system 50 times. You know, why can't we, the states, get together? You know, and so I would just sort of say, you know, if there are, when you go into contracts with, you know, vendors, sort of think about what's reusable in what you're paying for and what you might, you know, look at a new contracting approach. It's almost like a gated source thing. You know, it's maybe not even fully open source, but you say, we'll share this with, you know, with other cities and look for those opportunities for reuse.
I think a good example of that is datasf.org. It's built on open source technology, so there's no new costs associated with building it. And the fact is that if any other municipality wants it, whether it's Berkeley or Oakland, they can get it from us. And we're more than happy to share the customizations that we've done, and we want to give back those customizations back into the community, so we're not considered leeches. And I think that's a really important piece, that we have the same problems everywhere here. And why do we keep on trying to solve them individually? We need to partner and collaborate more. And I think open source is a great way to try to achieve that. That's just on the technology piece of it. And I think, Tim, you're right. We need to expand that concept. But if we can prove it in technology, I think it goes a long way to demonstrate that it is a viable model.
We have one of the leaders of the Creative Commons here, not to put you on the spot, but is there, what do you think is the best license for government data?
None, actually. That's actually the one suggestion I have for improvements. And congrats on datasf.org. But the terms of service could use some improvement. Right now, you're saying basically, if you download the data, you don't actually have any rights, and that's kind of a worse practice. In the U.S., data, at least factual data, is in the public domain. And federal government actually has an ideal policy where no government works are restricted by copyright. This is really important for massively collaborative projects like Wikipedia and OpenStreetMap. They rely on the data that they use being completely legally cleared. And if they're not certain, then they just don't use it because they might get... And there are a lot of places in the world where data is much more restrictive. So this is some place where SF can really be a leader and be completely open. So public domain data is kind of the mantra.
And
Hard to argue with that, Chris.
Well, and believe me, we've had many a discussion with our city attorneys over that particular issue, and we have struck a deal, and we will be moving forward with the ideals that you said as we take this beta into its next stage. So we understand exactly what you're saying, but there are some legal issues that we're working through, and hopefully we'll be able to change going forward.
I'm extremely familiar working with lots of institutions and companies, the desire of lawyers to be conservative, but this is really an important point where you need to make the investment because a lot of cities are going to copy what San Francisco does, and you're not going to be able to have public sites that aggregate all of that data because they simply are going to be uncertain. And there are cases every month you read about a transportation data case where some company, there's an uncertain contract between a municipality and a company, and they don't let anybody else use the data. So just set the precedent in public domain.
And just one last thing I'll say about that. Part of the open SF concept that we talked about is focusing on procurement and trying to make sure that we are putting open source at an equal footing with non-open source technologies as we go through a process. San Francisco, like any government organization, has very clear rules about making open and competitive processes. And since open source really isn't the same same as a COTS product. How do you equalize in that, make sure that departments are considering them equally? So that's one of the next steps that we're taking, is trying to figure out how we can do that and work within our rules and regulations. So again, another good point, and it's on our list, and I hope to be able to launch something in the near future.
So my name is Chris Messina. I run a consulting company, also as an agency, and I wonder, I'm sort of curious how you're hoping to maybe change the culture of government, of the municipal government. Tim makes a good point with the vending machine, and one of the problems is that a vending machine gives you a coin slot, and that's how you interact with it. So the design of the vending machine itself actually determines how you use it. So one of the things that I'd like to see is actually more of a collaborative spirit, a collaborative environment, where people, let's say, from the government or working around the government sector are actually encouraged and provided the permission to go out and actually work through community means and things like that. Matt and I, for example, started an event several years ago called Bar Camp, based on Tim's model of Food Camp. And it's an open model where people come and actually assemble the event the day that they arrive. And one of the things that's been very interesting about that emergence event model is the types of different interests and ideas that are represented in that kind of space. And I would love to see the government get involved in things like that, again, allow and sort of prove this idea of collaboration and participation. So it's not just a matter of having an API that, it's like a vending machine that doesn't require quarters, but it actually is changing the whole model and your metrics for success, so that you're actually working with people to solve their problems with them. And then, as Tim said, also show or direct a spotlight at those things which are demonstrating the good acts that are being made with this type of data, so that you can then encourage further ones to be done in the same footprint. On another point, and sort of this collaboration thing, one of the things that, as an independent, or from the independent perspective, one of the things that we lack are spaces for people to come together and collaborate, physical spaces. One of the things that the city has is physical resources. I started something called the co-working space up the street on 2nd Street, and the idea is to bring together independents and folks to just drop in, actually on a daily basis, as an alternative to cafes where you typically don't know people, there's no community, to actually create sort of a locus of activity. And this effort has spawned an international movement of these spaces being created around the world by other independents, and it'd be really interesting, I think, to see the city of San Francisco get behind that idea, support co-working, and to, again, draw the spotlight to those independent spaces that are creating a real place for people to go to feel like they can work on these types of projects or talk to other people who are interested in these ideas. Thank you.
Here. One more comment, just to follow up to what Chris said, and that is a lot of the vibrancy of a city like San Francisco comes from tens of thousands of individuals and small companies, and not just from big companies. And one of the tendencies that we see in government is to deal with a smaller and smaller circle of larger, players. In fact, I probably shouldn't bring politics into this, but one of the other candidates for governor was, at eBay, I think made a really strategic mistake by, gradually moving away from that grassroots marketplace of small, players that had made this eBay an amazing community, to saying, oh, well, actually all the money's with the big guys. And, eBay became less vibrant, and you saw that over time it slipped and started to lose share. And I think in a similar way, when governments cater to big companies, because of course they say, oh, well, that's, we can knock down a lot more economic activity with only one decision or one deal, they actually long-term undermine the vibrancy of the economy, because it really is bottom up. It's the small guys who is where the churn, the invention, the novelty comes from. And so I would just sort of urge you to support what Chris is saying, more ways to interact with individuals and small companies.
There we go.
And I want to make a comment as well. I run this conference called Biz Tech Day, and also I actually run San Francisco Entrepreneur Meetup. And I have almost 3,000 members. Just by hearing this effort is great. At the same time, what will I tell my members? What exactly should they contribute or help? Let's say there's crime rate data is unverified right now. If they actually know something, should they actually go somewhere, maybe help the government to make sure this data correct? And second, what exactly would you recommend, or maybe the team already has something in place, or what is the next steps? Is it something that, other than obviously this room of so all these smart people, but normal people don't understand how do you actually use these data set. Can I actually just have like simple things, step 1, 2, 3, this is me as a small business owner can actually leverage these and maybe support or vice versa.
So one of the pieces of the vision for OpenSF is to actually create a toolkit for small businesses and for people using open source technology to do exactly just that. So I know we're running out of time, and so Blair Adams, the Chief Technology Officer for the Department of Technology, there he is, and Jay Nath, who is passionate and is basically heading up the R&D function of my department, will be people that you can talk to after this about helping us take it to the next step and working with us in order to make it a better product. Yes?
Just a quick comment to Chris's point. I wanted to recognize both Jay and Kelly for being at Transparency Camp a couple weeks ago. They are participating in that community. And just to say to anyone else who's interested, we're planning a city camp for probably January and hope that a lot of you will come. And if anyone's interested in helping plan that, please come talk to me.
And I think we need to change that so it's not sponsored by great folks like Tim, that it needs to be sponsored by the city, so that we're hosting an event where we're trying to solve a problem, whether it's around transit or any other issues. We've got so many smart people around here that I think if we put our heads together, we can solve these big challenges.
So with that, I want to end by again thanking everybody here. And actually, there's someone who's been an unsung hero throughout all of this, is Kelly Pretzer. Kelly, where are you? There she is. Kelly, thank you for everything. So what we're taking away from this is that the bar may be low, but we're starting to address it, and we will be back over and over again, and we need your help to make it better, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you in order to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody.